Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Fly today, recapping Day 3 of the Men's World Championship happening in Herding, Denmark and Stockholm, Sweden. So we'll hop into today, of course, with the scores from today's game, starting with Group A, where we'll see Slovakia beating Slovenia 3-1. And now this was a game that I think kind of goes to show sort of what kind of team we're going to see out of Slovenia. Obviously, we look back to the other day where Slovenia played Canada. It's an interesting game for that Slovenia team in that one where you're playing against a more of a powerhouse team. You're just trying to sort of hold on as long as you can. But in my eyes, this was going to be the first real test for Slovenia at this tournament, playing against Slovakia, a team that, in my eyes, they very well could have beaten. And today, they played exactly as they needed to have a shot in this one. And yes, the final score might have been a 3-1 final, but you look at this game and you think about what could have happened, what should have happened. And as much as it's a 3-1 final, you throw in the goal that got disallowed for Slovenia. That's a 3-2 hockey game. You throw in a potential empty net strike. That's the 3-3 goal. And then all of a sudden, you're at a tie game and could get interesting. So for Slovenia today, as much as it's a tough loss to take at the hands of a team that very well could have been beaten at this tournament, I do think it is a step in the right direction. We talk about momentum a lot in this tournament. It's about building momentum for the eventual game that matters. For the Slovenian team, they showed that they are able to build that momentum. And I'm curious to see if they can carry that through the rest of this tournament, because as of this point, they've played two real good defensive games so far. Now it's just a matter if they can find the back of the net with enough goals to sort of counteract their defensive mistakes. So for Slovenia today, it was a good enough game, I'd say. You look sort of at their third period when desperation started to kick in. And yes, you get the 5-on-3, which always helps. But for Slovenia, you need to be able to find ways to score goals 5-on-5, especially against some of the weaker teams at this tournament. Otherwise, you'll be headed back to relegation. So for Slovenia, good enough game today, I'd say. For Slovakia, it was one of those games where I thought they played really, really well for the first two periods. Why can't they just play a full 60-minute effort? And, you think their first game was a tough one against Sweden. But for the Slovaks today, they had every chance of taking this game, and they took advantage early, and then they kind of played too much defense towards the end, and that eventually cost them. And we see that quite a bit through some of these teams, whether it be Slovakia, whether it be Czechia, who we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But we see them dominate play in the offensive end for the first two periods. And the third period rolls around, they have the lead, and they think, we should probably play some defense. And then you see them slowly but surely start to lose their lead, whether it be in terms of their advantage, their offensive push, or in the goal category. But for Slovakia today, they did take the 3 points. Can't ask for much more than that. They do win 3-1 in this one, and moving now to the second game. Not too much to talk about in this one. Canada winning 7-1 over Latvia. This was a game I would say that you could just tell that Canada was the better team, and not to say Latvia isn't a good team. I don't intend that to come across, but you could see the skill differences in this one, whether it be McKinnon walking through the team or finding the empty seams. You could just sort of tell that skill difference was a little bit too much to overcome today for Latvia. The only way that you normally see these games go is if you can clog the middle of the ice. That's when Latvia has that chance. Today, they weren't able to do that. Your end result, a 7-1 victory for Canada. And then to the drunk game we go with Finland and France. And so let's talk about this one, because you will find, and we'll start here with France up 2-1 late in the third period. You will then find France scoring the empty net goal, and you might think, hey, the game's over. 2 minutes left, the empty net. Surely Finland won't pull their goalie again, right? Right? You can see the score. They pulled their goalie again. And sure enough, they did. And sure enough, they scored 2 goals with the goalie pulled, tying the hockey game, forcing overtime, the final 2 minutes. And you can guess what happens when Finland plays France in overtime. The Finns, who dominated the entire game, find themselves the winners of this one in overtime, a 4-3 final at that. But this was a weird game where we saw Finland have so many opportunities to score goals, to find the back of the net, and they just couldn't find it. And I don't know if it's as much that it was the goaltending in net as much as it was an inability to score for the Finns, and we've seen that a little bit at this tournament, where Finland just hasn't been able to find the back of the net in ample amounts as we've seen in years past. And that could become a problem. You think about who they're going to have to play. They're going to have to play Sweden. They're going to have to play Canada. Teams that are going to score a lot of goals, no matter what defensive style you play. For Finland, they're not going to be able to win those games by, 2-1, 3-2. They're going to need to score goals and be able to contend with teams that are going to put up, 2, 3, 4 goals in a game. So for Finland, it's starting to become a bit of a concern for me that they're not able to find the back of the net. Sure, it's early in the tournament, so you can sort of discredit that. It's hard to find the empty ice. So yes, you could argue that, but I just think that for the Finns, it's dangerous territory for them if they continue to have an inability to find the back of the net. As for France today, they played the near perfect game. They found the chances and they buried the chances when they had them. 2 pucks, nearly identical goals too, I might add, off the rebound, where it just happened to be on the left-hand backhand side, where, flipping it up top of the net, 2 goals in that way, and you nearly had in the empty net as well. And then you might also add in the near empty net goal, the second one, when the game was 3-2. Unfortunately for France today, couldn't find the second empty net goal. They lose this one 4-3 in overtime. To the news we go for Group A. We'll start here with Slovakia was slipping by. It was a rough third period for Slovakia in this one. As much as, yes, they're still a good team, and yes, Slovenia found a goal in that third period. It's important to be able to play that full 60 and close the game out strong instead of letting teams claw back in. Because when you look at who they're going to have to play, and we'll talk about the Austria game coming up here in a couple minutes, but it's important for the Slovakian team to be able to close out games, because you let teams back in like Austria, like a Latvia, you're going to find some problems. So for Slovakia, slipping by, making sure you play a full 60 is all you need to do. As for Slovenia, with no walkover, they're not a walkover at this tournament. They're going to be a competitive team. The one question still remains, though, is can they find the back of the net 5-on-5? Time will tell on that one. As for Canada, with the wagon, and today kind of showed that upper echelon of teams might be existent at this tournament, where we see, Sweden and Canada sort of outplay some of the lower end teams in Group A. But in the same respect, no game's a guarantee, right? You look at kind of what's been going on, and there's upsets just about every day. Might not be, in the standings, but you might see it in the scores. So for Canada, wagon, keep it rolling. Do not let it stop, because once you let it stop, that's when bad things happen. As for Latvia today, they were outgunned, and you could really see that. Not to take away from the way Latvia played. They played a good enough game today. Unfortunately, they just got beat by a better team. As for Finland, with the comeback, that was probably one of the better comebacks we've seen in the last few years. It was one that I think will go down in Finnish history as one of the better comeback games. Obviously, with not as high a stakes as some of the other more notorious comebacks, but 2 goals with the goalie pulled after already getting 1 empty net scored on you. That's the stuff of legacy. So congrats to Finland on the comeback win. Should have found those goals a little bit earlier, but hey, you can't win them all. As for France today, it was Je suis désolé. Pardon my French, but that is, I am sorry for those who do not speak French. And for the French today, you can't say anything. And it's not that they didn't play well. They played exactly as they needed to. They played against a better opponent, had the 3-1 lead with the empty net with 2 minutes left, and unfortunately just let it slip through their fingers. So for the French today, Je suis désolé. I am very sorry for the outcome, but with that, we will now move to Group B, where we'll talk here the first game of the day with USA and Hungary. This one was an obliteration, and I don't have too much to say about this game. I thought Hungary did a not so great job at defending the U.S., but I also think the U.S. found ways to penetrate the middle of the ice and create high quality chances, which is one of the things Hungary really needs to crack down on. And We've seen that their last 2 games where they're allowing way too many chances in the middle of the ice towards some of the more dangerous areas where they're kind of getting in their trap style a little bit too high, sort of defending against the defense. That's where they're going to see some problems. So for Hungary, sort of tightening up that box a little bit more in their trap, that's going to really help them. But, of course, we'll see if they're able to do that because it is starting to get down to the wire for them. Second game of the day between Germany and Kazakhstan. Remember back, Kazakhstan with the upset yesterday. Unfortunately, they could not pull off the victory today against Germany. Germany outplayed Kazakhstan, in my eyes, in just about every aspect of this game. Yes, Kazakhstan goes up early, but then we saw Germany play their game the rest of the way, and they played well. And it wasn't one of those games where, it was like, I don't know who's going to win this one. It was, even when they went down, you're looking at that game saying Germany's going to win this game because of the way that they're playing. So in my eyes, Germany, well-played game today. Kazakhstan found areas of opportunity, couldn't bury them, but Germany really cracked down defensively, and I think they're a very underrated team at this tournament that's kind of flown a little bit under the radar. Don't be surprised to see an upset from them, especially with the addition of Tim Stützle, who should be coming over in the next couple of days, hasn't been officially added yet, but something to keep an eye on there. We'll see if he is a part of the team over the next couple of days. Who knows? Obviously, stuff happens as well, but definitely something to keep an eye on in that one. And then the third game of the day between Norway and Czechia, and this was another game that just kind of makes your head hurt a little bit. And it wasn't really the fact that, Norway played a very good game today. Czechia, they had some looks. They capitalized on a few of them. But really, they should have won this game by a lot more. And I didn't think they played too great. I think they definitely looked good. And you think about, right, with Iihf coming into the lineup for them in today's game, that was one of the things that I was most interested to see. He was decent. You could see him on the ice. But I just don't know if that's the impact that you're looking for out of that kind of caliber of player. I think you're looking for at least a couple points, especially against some of the weaker teams at this tournament. But still remains to be seen, for the Czechs kind of finding their groove at this tournament. We saw it in that Swiss game where, they had a rough start and they started to come back. They found their groove and they had, of course, let up the goal and then continued their momentum into overtime. So for the Czechs, just continuing to find their groove. You pick up the 3 points, great. Don't worry about it moving forward. But it is important to remember that every game at this tournament counts. Every goal at this tournament counts. So just make sure you're not taking shifts off because eventually you will get burned on one of those. But that will do it for our games. Now to the news for Group B. With the U.S., with Greasy. And this U.S. team has impressed me with not necessarily their skill, but the way that they're scoring goals. And it's those dangerous area goals where they're not afraid to go to that slot area, that inner slot area. Most of their goals are kind of, 10, 15 feet from the net, where it's, jam plays or one-timers from point-blank range. And those are the kind of goals that goal scorers score. And I think that's where you're going to see the U.S. really do well, especially against some of the trap-style teams at this tournament, where they're able to expose that middle of the ice. That's where the dangerous stuff happens. So obviously the 6 goals today is a real positive for the U.S., and they'll continue that moving forward. But the U.S. Has found ways to be very efficient in the offensive end. We'll see if that can continue throughout the rest of this tournament for them. And then the second one, we go with the collapse. And for Hungary, the way that they play is that collapsing trap-style defense. And one of the things that they need to do is collapse. And right now, they're kind of getting a little too far spread out. It's with that extra ice that you're not playing on those North American rinks where they're just that much, that much more narrow, where that extra 10, 15, or however many feet of the international ice, you can see the difference and you can see the way the teams are playing, because the U.S. just has that much more space to draw defenders out and penetrate the middle of the ice, whoever it might be that they're playing. Germany did it as well in their last game. Hungary's got to find ways to tighten that up and not allow, goals in those dangerous areas and keep the puck out of the middle of the ice if they want any shot at winning. Then the third one we go with Germany, who are continuing to roll, and they're a team at this tournament I think are going to start to turn some eyes as this goes onward. They're a good team. They're a very underrated team, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them pull off an upset or two at this tournament. Then to the fourth one we go with back down to earth for Kazakhstan, obviously coming off a big win against Norway yesterday. I was curious to see how they'd perform in this one. Fortunately, they didn't get the win, but still having a big 3 points in the standings means a lot, especially when the team you got to play is the one that's been lit up the last couple of days. So Kazakhstan continuing to keep it rolling. As for Norway rather, with the late push today, too little, too late, if you will. But Norway played a real good game today, and another tight one at that, where it's another 1-goal game for them, where they have the shot. Unfortunately, couldn't pull it off. They continue to play that way. Don't be surprised to see Norway make an impact. Obviously, a tough loss already to the Kazakhs, but at the same time, there's still time in this tournament for Norway to turn it around, pull off a couple upsets, and get themselves into the quarterfinals. Then to Czechia we go with its 3 points, I guess, right? Where you don't ask how, just how many. So for the Czechs today, a big 3 points in the standings. You never want to lose points, especially against some of the weaker teams. This is a big 3 points for the Czechs, especially after already dropping 1 point to Switzerland. You want to continue that, especially when you look at the tiebreakers coming up, where you're going to have to basically beat the U.S. You don't want to have to make it a forced regulation win. Better to have the ability to move it to overtime. So that'll do it for our day, the scores and the news. We'll now move to the standings. So we start here in Group A with Sweden and Canada, both tied in first place. Then you have Finland in third with 5 points. Latvia and Slovakia in fourth and fifth, tied with 3 points each. Then you have France with 1 point from the overtime loss today. Then you have Slovenia and Austria, both with 2 regulation losses in last place and second last place. Remember, the bottom team in each group will be relegated at the end of this tournament, so lots to play for these teams to avoid that last spot in the group. Remember, it's always the game that matters at these tournaments, especially for some of these bottom-feeding teams. Just to stay above in the top division 1 year longer is always something to look for these teams. And then to Group B, we will go with Germany and USA, both tied in first place. The Czechs in third with 5 points. Switzerland, in fourth place with 4 points. Kazakhstan in fifth place with 3. Then you have Norway, Hungary, and Denmark all tied in the last spot with 2 regulation losses each. Of course, we will see what goes on with them. They have obviously quite a few games left. Each team has now played 2 games at this tournament. But as this tournament goes onward, these standings are going to become a lot more important, and we'll have a lot more to talk about, especially with some of the what-if scenarios. But for today, once again, we still don't have too many, still 2 games to play, so we'll talk about that a lot more in the weeks, in the days to come. But we'll now talk about tomorrow's games, and lots of implications. We'll start here in Group A for May the 12th, starting up at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time between Austria and Slovakia. And this is a game that I honestly think is a toss-up. And coming into this tournament, I wasn't sure. I thought, this will be a tight game. I can't remember what prediction I made for this one, but I assume I would have made it a tight prediction. But I think the way we've seen Slovakia play at this tournament, where they haven't really had that killer instinct that we've seen from years past, combined with the way Austria's been playing, where they nearly beat Sweden the other day. They had a real good game against the Finns. It wouldn't surprise me to see Austria take this one, especially if they can continue to play the way they've been playing. This is a very dangerous Austrian team. Don't be surprised to see them take it tomorrow. But still, on paper, the favorites are the Slovaks, so also should mention that. But for me, Austria is a team that I think could very well upset Slovakia tomorrow. So keep an eye on that one. Then to the second game of the day, of course, as always, it is the game of the day between the two. One of the best rivalries in sports, Finland versus Sweden at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time. This is going to be, I'd argue, probably the best game of the day. And, tomorrow is a day of games where there's not one that I think is going to get out of hand. And I think it's going to be a tight game in just about all of them, where, for Finland and for Sweden, these are the teams that are trying to fight for that top spot in Group A. And yes, Finland hasn't had a great start to this tournament, but they've played exactly as they needed to have 5 points and a chance to win the top spot in the group if they win the rest of their games. So For Finland, lots to play for. Sweden, as always, lots to play for. One of the best rivalries in sports, Finland and Sweden. Stay tuned for that one. We'll now talk about Group B's games. We'll start here with the Switzerland and USA. And this will be another game where it's going to be a dogfight for the top of Group B. And I think, you throw the Czechs in there as well between those three teams, just likely who you're going to see as the top spot in Group B. And who knows, maybe you even throw a team like Germany in there where they have the ability to definitely pull off an upset. And I think they're a team that very well could make a mark at this kind of tournament. So for Switzerland, for the USA, lots to play for, looking for big 3 points on the line. We already saw the Swiss cause some problems for Czechia. We'll see which U.S. team comes out, especially early against a Swiss team that likes to come out hot. So keep an eye on this one. It's going to be a good one. Probably going to be my game of the day in Group B. I think, the two games of the day, although I really want to take three, I really want to include that Slovakia-Austria game, are your Switzerland, U.S., Sweden, Finland, and then, of course, Austria and Slovakia as your big three of the day. But very well, that game, I think, is probably going to be the best, closest game we'll see. I think the next closest one we'll see is Austria-Slovakia. But in terms of the best sort of hockey we'll see, it will be between these two teams tomorrow. But as well, Finland-Sweden, I think, could get out of hand for the Swedes if they play their style of game and they don't get too fancy like we've seen in the last couple of days. Could be something to keep an eye on that one. But then the second game of the day in Group B is Denmark and Czechia. Remember the home Danes against Czechia. We'll see which momentum shifts, kind of take control of this game. And I think if Czechia allows teams like Denmark, especially on home ice, to be able to come back in games and gives them that opportunity, don't be surprised to see the Danes beat Czechia tomorrow. But the Czechs can control the momentum of the game, especially early on, take the crowd out of it, get some goals and get some support for their goaltender. You're going to see the Czechs really walk away with it. So some great hockey coming tomorrow. Always going to be a good one, but that will wrap it up for our scheduled programming. We'll now go into live questions, and we'll start here from one from Nick, the IIHF fan, who is a great ad on Twitter, if you have not already, who says, for Canada and Latvia, I'll admit I was a bit worried when Canada gave up the first goal, but I'm glad they figured things out after that. I wasn't expecting 7-1, though. Slovakia, Slovenia. Who knows how different things could have been if Slovenia didn't have that one goal called off due to offside. As for Finland and France, which team do you think will take a longer look back on the points they left on the table today? And as for Finland and Sweden tomorrow, that game is going to be a battle in more ways than we first thought. And that's exactly right. And we'll start here with the Canada-Latvia game. And yes, I if you look back to the preview, I think I had the game 5-1 as the final, I think, in that one, where the way Latvia plays, and we saw it a bit in their last game, where they just kind of have problems with the rush, and they've given up a lot of rush chances. And you look at the way Canada's designed and its speed, and they're going to really hurt you if you give them that opportunity to go on rush chances. And today I wouldn't say a lot of the scoring chances that Canada scored on were from the rush, but it definitely added to that factor where Latvia had to sort of change their defensive structure on the fly. And I think that's kind of what led to all those goals. But for Latvia today, this is a game you consider to be a wash. You're going to play Canada, wash it. Let's move to the next one. And every game's important at this tournament for Latvia, who are trying to scratch their way into the quarterfinals. These are the games coming up that you really need to win. So for Canada-Latvia today, good game. For Canada, I think Latvia can wipe it off and move on to the next one just fine. Then to Slovakia-Slovenia, I completely agree about the goal that got called off. Could have been a very different game, and you really never know. And I think that's kind of the joy of sports and the way hockey works is one call can change a game and can change the momentum of a game. But who knows? You also might not see the 5-on-3 if Slovenia scores that goal before, because all of a sudden Slovakia is playing hard on the third and the offensive end. Could be any mixture of things. As for Finland and France, who I think will take a longer look back on the points they left on the table, I think, in my eyes, I don't think it's going to matter too much in the grand scheme of it. I look back kind of at my rankings and my predictions for this tournament. That loss shouldn't hurt too badly in terms of the standings. I expect Finland to kind of walk through the rest of Group A, and I think they'll still lose to Finland and Canada, but I think the rest of the way that sort of this tournament structured, I think Finland will be just fine in that third spot. For France, I didn't expect them to be that much at this tournament. I don't think that they lose to Slovenia. So I don't think that it's going to hurt them that badly. I think they still kind of end up in the same range as before, but really who knows? And then for Finland and Sweden tomorrow, it is going to be a battle, and I'm very excited. So be sure to come back tomorrow for our day recap. We'll break that game down as well as the other three. It's going to be a good one. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you like, subscribing. Tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on day 3 of the Men's World Championship. Until next time, see you.